Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I have a special guest. His name is Joe DeStefano, and he is totally one of the coolest people you'll ever meet. I hope you enjoy this fragment of the conversation that we had on my podcast, the Daily Inspirational Podcast, which you'll see here, and you can catch the links below to get to it through my website. And of course, Joe's podcast from Los Angeles, known as the Stacked Podcast, which you'll also see here as well, and there's a link to it down below. Today's conversation is about stress and stress in our lives. These are just excerpts from the main podcast, which you can pick up on either Joe's podcast on Apple or mine as well. But either way, I'm telling you, pay attention, soak it up a little bit, because there's a lot of great things about this podcast that can help you to deal with stress and to keep your body and your mind healthy. So I hope you enjoy it, and don't forget to check out the links below. Thanks. So listen, here I am with my good buddy Joe, and we just thought we'd have a little conversation about stress. Yeah. Stress is the
good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's a sucker if you don't know how to handle it. So Joe, you came in from LA.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see you again. For those of you who don't know Mr. Joe, he is the founder of Runga Life, and he's the man. A long time ago. How long has it been since we've known each other?
My gosh. I mean, I think I first went to you about 10 years ago. 2009, I started to have some issues after a head injury and some concussion stuff, and I was kind of in a little bit of a grim place, actually. I wasn't feeling very good, and I was worried about kind of where I was going and where my health was headed, just because I was, again, having some neurological stuff and needed some care, and yeah,
it worked out.
I'm grateful I walked into your office that day.
You know, I thought today would be kind of cool to talk a little bit about stress, seeing this is the Daily Inspirational Podcast. Let's try to inspire some people to get over some of the most heavy weights of their lives, which is basically stress. So, you know, I want to ask you, like, what the hell is it?
Yeah. And you know what's so funny, Doc, is thinking back to those days, it was so... When we met, and I look back, I had a head injury, right? And I had some symptoms associated with that. But really what I was living every day in was the stress I created around the thing. So there was the head injury, and there was the fact that I had to rebuild from this place. But what was really deteriorating my health was the thoughts about the thing.
Right.
And was the internalization of, but by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a Parkinson's patient. I'm not going to be able to play sports anymore. I'm going to be the guy that's like messed up, that everyone wonders what's wrong with him. So there's all the thoughts about the thing instead of, yo, you got to fix the thing.
Right.
And I think, if I define stress, it's that inner anxiety, it's that fear, it's that worry, it's that chemical, that hormonal cascade that happens inside of us as the result of our thoughts.
Yeah. I like that, Joe, I like the way you said that, because there are events that take place that evoke initial emotions that, whether it's pain, it's anxiety, and they're valid, because everybody should be valid in the way they feel. Right. I always ask people, how long do you want to feel that way? For me not to say, well, that's silly that you feel that way and that you're creating all this stress. I go, no, hold on, man.
Right.
How long do you want to feel that way? Because we actually do have choice.
Right.
If we want to choose to be happy, we can. But, it kind of reminds me of our lives and what we've already achieved is that there's a lot of obstacles when you grow within something you love and you cherish as much as inspirational speaking and teaching people. But man, Ashev, there's so much stuff that you have to get through. And what do? You just start.
Right.
You just begin. And you put one brick on the wall and you keep putting another brick on the wall. And, isn't it funny when you walked into the studio, I built the studio for you listeners, and it was a crap show in here and we made it happen.
Yeah.
And here we are, we're sitting in it now. This dream is becoming a reality, but it really came one step at a time.
Right.
And was there stress involved? Yeah, of course there was. But I had to learn to get past it and not do what you just said, which was put too much meaning to things that really didn't deserve it in the first place.
Right.
Instead of wondering why someone else is getting something that I'm not, How about figure out what can I do today that would help me to get what I want?
Right.
I always thought that it's the question that you ask is really important.
Right.
If you ask a question like, how can I, rather than why,
Right.
why will tell you because you're lazy and you don't work hard enough.
Right.
How is buckle down, study every night, and work your butt off.
Right.
They're questions, and we ask questions every day. The question is, which question are you asking? You better ask the right one. You're not going to formulate the right response.
Right, 100%. And I think that, where you put your attention is where you put your energy. And I think this is I think this is some of the teachings of some other docs and people that teach this, but it's when we think about something or we worry about something, it's you're dumping all your energy that you could be putting into something constructive, into fear, into worry, but what if I build out the podcast room and no one listens?
Right.
Well, if that stops you from building, then, you're
already done.
You're not going to find out if that's going to happen
That's
or not.
true.
And so we kind of create these storylines, and often those storylines create more obstacles for us than we would otherwise even have to face. Right. And so, here we are.
Here's a little doctorate twist on stress for our listeners. Stress is created by the mind. You can't buy it on Amazon. You can't go find somewhere outside where you find stress. As a matter of fact, where's the best place to reboot yourself is outside, right? Get outside where humans come from, if you will. But when I look at stress today, I go, okay, so you manufactured it in your mind based on the conditioning of your life. Some people would say, oh, that's terrible. It's going to snow today.
Right.
Yeah, but when I was 7, a snow day was awesome. Right? I said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Then you become an adult and you begin to shift the whole meaning of what it is. And I'm like, so in other words, I created stress? Yes. You can't manufacture it.
Right.
And one situation, or a situation, we'll say a set of circumstances, and you got 5 people observing the circumstance that's in front of us. Some of those people would be like, wow, well, that's cool.
Right.
Let's try to fix that. And other people will say, oh, why bother?
Right.
It could never be, this is what it is. My life is crap and that's the way it goes.
Right.
I go, why is it that way? Because that's what you've learned. And either you learned it from somebody else who taught it to you, or you learned it through your own experiences through life, and you put it into your brain, and that becomes your go-to response every time crap hits the fan. You're immediately turned into Debbie Downer. I'm like, what would happen if you did that your whole life? Well, what happens when your brain secretes a chemical that deals with stress? It starts to make your body sick. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that chemical. And I think people know that chemical, which is
cortisol.
Cortisol. Yeah. Exactly. Cortisol is a son of a gun, but we need it.
Right.
It's interesting when you ask people, like I ask people, so let me ask you this. What do you think about cholesterol?
Right.
And give me a yes, a good or a bad. And they go, well, there's both. I go, well, not really. Unfortunately, there isn't good and bad. There is just what it does.
Right.
But, so tell me, is it good or bad to have a cholesterol problem? Well, they don't know. So, you look at, at cortisol and you go, what happens if you release a lot of it quickly because you're being chased by a perpetrator or somebody who wants to hurt you in a parking garage?
It's a performance enhancing chemical. I mean, before a race, before a contest with some of the athletes I've worked with, cortisol can be great. It's going to help you run from the line even faster.
Exactly.
So in that context, we start every day with a rise in cortisol. That's what gets us up in the morning. Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Doc, is like nothing's good or bad. Things we don't eat enough of are good. Things we eat too much of become bad.
Right.
So fish oil's good and sugar's bad. Well, that's just because you eat too much sugar and you don't get enough fish oil.
Right. Balance it. If you can possibly balance it, of course.
Right.
But I think that the interesting thing is like cortisol itself, it really is a good thing.
Right.
I mean, our bodies would not have it if it was meant to destroy us.
Right.
So what we do is we get under a stressful event or a bunch of scenarios that make us feel unsteady. And that's happening outside of us usually, right?
Yeah.
We have like this internal system that protects us, our immune system. Then on the outside, we have this other threat system, like, will I get to work on time? Will this red light, will the yellow light become red before I get there? Why is this dude switching lanes without his blinker on? These are all exterior threats that really, are they really threats? Well, our brain perceives them as threats because we say to perceive it that way.
Right.
So now you have 2 major systems that keep you steady steady in life. You've got your internal immune system to protect you from viruses and bacteria and parasites and things like that.
Yeah.
Then you have the outside, or your cortisol system, which protects you from anything that's going to try to muck up your life from the outside. So where do you think we put the majority of our attention? It's on the world around us.
The vigilance.
And who built that world?
We did.
Bingo. If you built it and it isn't good, are you capable of rebuilding it? Sure. Think about cold and flu season. I live obviously here in the North United States. So what happens during cold and flu season? When is it? It's December, January, February, right? It's cold, it's dark, and it's inclement weather. And if you don't like any of those, then you're going to be sick as a consequence of thinking about it and dealing with it every day, which jacks up the amount of cortisol stress hormone that you put into your blood all day long. And what does that hormone do? It inhibits your immune system and takes your internal dynamic system and makes it weak.
Right.
And then when do you get sick? Come on. I mean, Joe, how many people get sick in July when you live in the Boston area compared to how many people get sick in January?
Right.
You know, it's like, what?
Right.
So what would be a good strategy? Maybe go get yourself a winter hobby or take a trip to the Bahamas.
I mean, there's a lot of things we can do, but I think identifying is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Kind of understanding these loops we put ourselves in and that we can become our own worst enemy.
Yeah. I think that's really the key. We are our own worst enemy.
The immune system connection is super interesting to me. And, there's a book, Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Right.
And,
I know it well.
Robert goes deeper into that stuff than, most people care to read, but that's a great book.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was first exposed to this idea of that, the cortisol system, that stress response, that vigilance, that protector, actually chipping away at the immune system one cell at a time and really kind of reducing your ability to fight infection. Because when you're running from that lion, you don't care if you get a flu in 2 months. You're hoping you're here in 2 months.
Yeah, you got to survive the event, right? You don't ovulate when you're being chased by a lion, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you allocate the resources that you would otherwise be detoxifying your systems with or improving your health.
So can I ask you this? Do you think that people just get pooped out and tired when they're stressed? Mm-hmm. They don't have any internal energy left because they did it all what? They used it all?
You dissipate it.
Exactly. Because of the stress you're under, worrying. And how much worry actually comes to fruition. Do you remember do you remember Earl Nightingale, one of the old time
speakers? You gave me a whole bunch of his stuff back in the day.
Lead the Field or something. I think it was
Lord.
called. It was wonderful. I love listening to him. He's an amazing man, and you guys should check him out. By the way, he's an old timer, but he's fantastic. He's gone, but
Dr. P had me give me his. You took my laptop during a session, right? So. And while we were doing our thing, you had set my computer up. So when I got home, my whole desktop was just Earl Nightingale.
Right. and it was Earl Nightingale that said that he had read a study that showed that 93% of the things that you stress over never happen.
Right. And they're never in the moment.
Right.
So, it's so funny to me, and maybe this is because I like to play craps sometimes, not that I do very often, but worry is it's like placing a bet against yourself.
Right.
Right. You're like, it's like, at the craps table, it's like, you're not going to put the bet on the pass line. You're going to don't pass. I'm going to bet against myself.
Yeah. That's
makes sense. Worry.
Yeah.
And when you think about worry and stress in that light, it's like, oh man, that would be a pretty dumb thing to do. I got enough people rooting against me to root against myself.
Right. You get no chance if you're already legged down because you're betting against yourself. Crazy.
Right.
That immune system, though, it's funny because it's an infection fighter, obviously.
Right.
But it's an inflammation producer, and it does so many more things that people just don't know. You can't afford to dysregulate your immune system. Right. So by putting putting your own personal twist on a circumstance, it better be a good twist because the brain will then create it into a fixed action pattern of thinking this way constantly.
Right.
I like to think of it this way. Like your brain has a hierarchy of what it wants to pay attention to.
Right.
Imagine like an air traffic controller. If you've ever seen them at work, they have like little blocks with numbers of flights on it, and they have 5 of them, and they're moving them around in priority. So they go, okay, we now have flight 105 from Miami coming to Boston, and he's in our area. So now he moves up on the priority list. So we are always constantly changing what is in our priority list. So we must prioritize the right emotional things in our head and the way we see things, because if it's number one and you're angry today, you wake up pissed, and you know you got to work next to Mary Stinkbones, who's flatulating next to you at work. You're like, I can't believe I have to do this. And then you colorize it, because don't humans tell stories over and over and over?
Yeah.
And then it gets funnier every year, doesn't it? If you have a family, for crying out loud, and a fire pit out back, all you do is talk about the funny things that so-and-so did. Yeah. You keep telling the story. So what you do is you colorize the story.
Right.
So the more times that you colorize the story, the more it takes precedence, the more it moves up in the priority list. And now that brain runs that pattern constantly, and it's on all the time. We must be careful about what we give priority to our brain. And the easiest place to get priority is turn on Good Morning America and get your butt whipped by garbage coming over the airwaves to weaken the crap out of you, to get your brain thinking negative thoughts.
Right.
What a bummer. I mean, when you meet somebody who's just like a Debbie Downer, they're the pessimist.
Right.
And it was, I think it was a Mayo Clinic did a study that said the pessimist dies 7 years before the optimist.
Right.
I'm like, why is that?
Right.
Because that brain releases chemistry, which is imprinting itself on the physical body. I mean, how many people have you seen? I know Joe you did a TED Talk.
Yeah.
Which was pretty impressive, man. If you get on a TED stage, you're the man. Now, tell me about that, because I watched it. It was all about breathing, and I want to hit that a minute. I want to talk about that. So give us a synopsis of what happened during that scenario.
Yeah. So, our breath is sort of it's kind of the gateway to our nervous system.